this week's Alteryx Week Challenge uses Pokemon data, which is great for me because I love Pokemon. But admittedly, I don't know all of these 800 Pokemon, or however many there are. I'm more of a up to Gen 3, which is up to Hoenn for anyone who's interested. So we get all of these Pokemon names and their types and all these other fields, and the first thing we want to do is be able to filter to different regions. So what I do here, the way that I chose to do it, is to just group by all of the different regions. So there are 8 in total, and then I want to cross-tab those so that they are columns instead of rows, so that I can use the select tool in order to filter them out. And we have our multi-select here. We take an output from where we've cross-tabbed them, and that feeds into our selecting list. You just have to make sure that it's fields from a connected tool, and we're in select tool mode. If you have them just in rows, then Alteryx can't read it that way. They need to be all the different column headers. So that's how that works, which took me ages to work out how that input worked the first time I used the list box. And our action just needs to be update select with multi-select list box. In our select tool, obviously we're not going to be deselecting any at the moment because for the app's purpose, we're just kind of keeping everything in. When we run the app, it actually will do the deselecting. So we do that, and then we transpose it back so that our regions are all in one column, so that we join it back to the data from the beginning. And we're joining name on region, and that just means that we've filtered out any regions that we don't want. And that's pretty effective. So that's kind of step 1 complete. Step 2, we're looking at the type. So the type we need to be able to filter using a drop-down. So we've got primary type and secondary type. So the first thing we want to do really is to transpose that so it's only in one column, so that either the primary type or the secondary type is whatever type you select in the drop-down. Now I've added on a record ID for this little bit because I just thought that was the easiest way to join Pokemon back to each other, because some Pokemon appear multiple times if they can have different types or if they appear in different regions. It's just simpler, I thought, to use a record ID to be able to join back in a similar way to what we did at the start here. So added that record ID, and then we're doing that transposing, as I mentioned, to transpose our type down into one column. To get the same list box input to our drop-down, then we're doing a similar thing where we're grouping by the type. We have some nulls here because not all Pokemon have a secondary type, so we need to get rid of those nulls, and then cross-tab them in a similar way so that we have each type as a field header so that we can feed it into our drop-down. So that's nice and easy. We're then just filtering our value here, which is all of the different types that Pokemon can have, and we're filtering that to anything. I've chosen bug here just because it was the first one in the list, and we're updating that value. So because you can only select one type at a time, we're just choosing which one we're filtering to, and we're joining it back on in a very similar way to before. So we're joining it on the record ID. The reason that I chose to not just simply uncross tab this here, if that's a word, transpose would probably be the word rather than cross tab, uncross tab. But anyway, the reason that I didn't choose to do it like that was because when we've got obviously it filtered down to our just bug type, then you can see here, for example, the secondary type is bug. We don't know what the primary type is because that information's kind of been lost through the way that we've chosen to filter it. So joining it back on the 17 instead will bring in all the information, the primary type as well as the secondary type. So that's why I've chosen to do it that way. Awesome. Now we're going on to our couple of tick boxes. Both of these are very similar. We're using the detour tool here. So the detour tool, if you haven't seen it, it just splits your workflow into 2, and this checkbox is the thing that we're updating basically, whether the workflow goes via the left or via the right. So by default it goes left, unless you've ticked here, then the data will go right. So our checkbox, our first checkbox is legendaries allowed. So Literally all we do to set that up is rename that and make sure that our action is doing the default action. I think it's the only thing that you can do. Oh no, you can still do some things, but anyway, we're just updating the detour direction. So that means that when you tick that box, it will go through to the right instead. So, but when it's not ticked, then that means that we want to be filtering out our legendaries. So basically we're just saying that our legendary column is not null, because when it is a legendary, it has the word legendary in it. So we're just excluding all those instances, as we can see if I click on the false here. There you go. We're just excluding those unless that box there is ticked. And in a very similar way, this is the box that you tick if you want no regionals. So therefore, by default, we're not filtering it. But if we have that box checked, then it will come down to the right and it will filter out the regionals in a very similar way. We don't have any data here because obviously at the moment it's flowing to the left rather than flowing to the right because we don't have the box ticked at the moment. And then we're just outputting our data. So to show that it works, on the specific question, then I believe it was Alola, Galar, Johto and Kanto. So let me just untick those, and we're checking on Ghost Pokemon, and legendaries are allowed. So if we finish, then we can see that we have the desired output of 22 Ghost Pokemon with all those constraints that we were asked for. So I hope that helped and was a fun challenge for everyone because I loved it. So thanks for watching.